Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the MASSmotos channel, where we are starting part 2 of my new series on learning how to ride. As always, if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for subscribing and following my content. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe, follow the series, and more content to come. So today in part 2, we're going to do another short video, even shorter than the first. It's going to be on the basic controls of your motorcycle, as well as the initial startup. So we're going to go over literally every control on the bike, mounting the bike, as well as starting it up, and that will roll us into part 3, which will be getting off for the first time on your bike, starting to ride, the clutch, all that stuff. So let's get right into it. Okay, so here, as you see on the bike, we've got all of the typical controls you might see on a motorcycle. Now, again, this is for complete beginner riders we're trying to gear this towards, so, you know, all this might be refresher for most people watching. Maybe it's good to see a new bike, controls on a different bike, but for anybody new, we want to keep this very simple so you know exactly what's happening. We're going to go over all of the basic controls of a motorcycle, starting with the ignition. So you got your key and your ignition slot right here. This obviously controls whether the bike is on or off, power on or off. So here you'll see on, starts to display all the electronics of the bike. Off, as well as you'll see in here a locking mechanism for the front wheel here. So if you turn that just the right amount, you can lock it. That way, when you're off your bike, say at a parking lot or in a store, you can keep it safe. The other main controls, the most main controls are clutch, throttle, brakes, and gear change, right? Gear lever. So we'll start with the clutch. Clutch is always going to be on the left-hand side of the bike. The left-hand lever here is your clutch. Opposite lever, you've got your front wheel brake. So this is a hydraulic brake, which some old bikes may not be hydraulic. They might actually be cable driven to a drum brake. This is a disc brake with hydraulic. So you've got hydraulic oil in here creating pressure on the discs. So you'll see that leads to our brake disc and our brake pads inside the brake caliper. So this has got dual brake discs here and dual calipers. Now, those are your front brakes. Rear brakes are going to be on the right-hand side of the motorcycle. This lever down here, push that down for your rear brake, and that's going to work in the same fashion. It's pushing up on this hydraulic cylinder here, which is using hydraulic oil up in this chamber, and that runs back down into your rear brake. This is actually not, this is ABS, but this is your rear brake caliper with your hydraulic line, pads in there, and a single brake disc on the rear wheel, mostly because you're using your front brakes more than your rear brakes typically. Moving on from there, you have your throttle. So this is your input that is going to provide fuel and additional air into the engine of the bike. So pulling back on this essentially increases your throttle, makes the bike go faster, and that is by cable down into your throttle body here on the bike, right? That feeds air and gas mixture essentially into your engine right there. So those are your main stop and go controls. Now, in order to make the bike move, you need to move it out of neutral, the gearbox out of neutral, into gear. So this is your gear change lever down here. And what you do is, traditionally, all modern bikes on, you know, US made are going to be first gear is one lever, one click down, and every other gear is going to be a full click up. And neutral lives right in between first gear and second gear. So I'll demonstrate that for you here. If we turn the bike on, it may or may not shift in. Sometimes it's weird when it's not moving. You're going to pull that clutch in, go down into first. It won't do it because the bike is not moving. However, you'll see here, the bike is in neutral right now. You always have a neutral light. So we'll show you the gear change at the end of this video then. Now, all these extra things, these are not standard bike controls or anything. These are add-ons. So on the left-hand side now, for additional controls, you have all your lighting, horn, and blinkers, or turn signals. So you'll see here, this button on the front is actually to flash your high beams. So you use this to flash folks if you need to warn them at night. This is your high and low beam, so it's on low beam now, and this is on high beam. So high beam, low beam, obviously, and actually, I'll show you that as well, the lights, when we start the bike up. Down here, your turn signals. So you'll see, click left, and you have your left turn signal, front and rear. Push that in to shut it off. over to the right, you've got your right turn signal, front and rear here. You push that in again to cancel them, and you always have horn as well. Now, if you ever need to put your hazards on, if you're stopped, mine are on the right-hand side of the bike. So I click that over, and it puts on both of my indicators, front and rear. And now here, you'll see the start-stop switch, right? So the only other major control for the bike or electronics is you have obviously your rear light here, which is going to be operated both by your rear brake as well as your front brake. So when those are depressed, your brake light will come on. Now, additional parts of the motorcycle that may be helpful, you have obviously, I explained the brakes. This is the engine, obviously. You have your gearbox behind the engine. You have your air intake in there or in here under the seat that goes into the intake manifold and then into the engine. You have your exhaust here, commonly changed by people when they modify their bikes. This is the exhaust manifold, or the headers, down into the exhaust muffler, essentially. And then in here you have your O2 sensor. Now, you noticed on the back I mentioned this bike has ABS. So that's an assisted braking system, essentially, that helps you to not lock up the rear wheels. So if I were to drive rear or front, and you'll see that by this little disc here, this slotted disc, this is used electronically to calculate if the wheel is skidding. If it's no longer rotating but the bike is moving, what the ABS will do is it will pump these brakes open rapidly so that the wheel can continue to turn and not skid. So that'll keep you upright in most cases when you have to go under heavy braking. So those are the very general controls that you need to know in order to start a motorcycle. Now, in order to mount the motorcycle, you have your kickstand here. Sometimes, depending on your bike, you may have a center stand, but you have my left side kickstand down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the bike, right? I'm going to plant my foot to the left of it, swing my leg over to the right, put my foot on the peg here, or you can go, if you're tall enough, you can go all the way down. And I like to sit, you can sit on this bike on the kickstand. It will completely stay up like this, right? So to get it up, you just push it up, put your brake on, flip up the kickstand, and I always put my rear brake whenever I'm stopped anywhere. That way I can keep my hands free if I want to. Additionally, you'll notice, and I'll show you this now, so to get the bike ready to start, some bikes will require you to pull the clutch in, others will not if you're in neutral. So this start-stop switch has a couple settings. So when I turn this down, the bike is essentially in start mode. So when I pull this, it starts the bike up. That's it. It's electronic start. So with the bike started, you'll notice it's in neutral. The clutch didn't need to be depressed, essentially, to start the bike. And one thing I will show you is with the bike running, if I put this kickstand down in neutral, the bike remains running. However, there is an additional safety control on motorcycles. You'll see if I put this into first gear, the bike is going to shut off. The reason for that is the kickstand's down. So if I now keep it in first gear, if I want to start the bike in first gear, I put the kickstand up. I have to pull in the clutch. You cannot start a bike in gear with the clutch out. I'll pull this down, and now it starts. And to move it, you'll notice if I want to go to neutral, I put in a half click there. The light goes into neutral. So it's one down, all the way up for two, and then this happens. You'll notice this will happen if you're not moving. The bike can't actually recognize what gear it's in. So I'm going to click this down into one. I can feel it's all the way down, and the gear level will stop moving. And from here, as long as your safety checks are good to go, you're going to learn how to move the bike, and that'll be in part 3. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully this was short, sweet, and to the point. I just wanted to go over the general equipment on the bike before you get ready to set off. So thank you very much for watching. If you could leave a like and a comment if you have any, criticisms or any feedback for these series. If you could, again, subscribe, like, comment, interact with the channel. I'm happy to answer questions. Stay tuned for part 3, and as always, stay safe, ride safe, especially in this weather, and just enjoy your bikes, and we'll catch you out on the road. Peace.